Okay, so welcome to another episode of With Enough Prep Time. I'm just going to be doing a video response to someone who did a video response to me, so it's a kind of like a discussion now. A very interesting video, and I commend it. I think you should have a look at it. It was by Terrance, and he was basically, I would say the video is mostly a defense of Man of Steel, as well as it's an argument against some of what I was saying in my last video, where I was talking about Batman versus Superman, and how I don't think it's a very good idea to do that as a sequel to Superman, because I felt that Superman deserved more and deserved a sequel of his own to establish who the character was, because the character wasn't very well established in his own movie, which was Man of Steel. So he put forward some very, very good arguments, and I just want to run through them and kind of engage with them. I'm not going to necessarily say he's wrong, because I don't think he's wrong on all the points. So let's start with the first one. He said Superman, that a lot of people he sees criticizing the movie seem to be saying that they don't recognize that as Superman. That they want some kind of Christopher Reeve style, overblown Boy Scout, with, just a light kind of, I don't know, something along those lines, like a kind of light comical, more, like Batman's very dark and gritty, but Superman's very full of levity and joy and stuff like that. Now, to that point, I say this. I totally was sold on the idea of taking Superman down the route, and this is the thing I always was saying, taking Superman down the route of a realistic world, okay? Like a real world. So Superman is in our world. So what would it be like if Superman, we take this comic character from, from the comic strip, from this, and said, okay, well, look at the features of this guy's story. Much like Batman, there is a sense in which, you could pretend that you could, if you were smart enough, you could pretend that you could ground this story in something resembling reality, and also, along with that, give Superman a kind of psychological realism, along with the rest of his, supporting cast and villains. Now, that's what they did with Batman Begins. They took a story that is completely fantastical, of a billionaire becoming some vigilante, of the night. And what they did was, okay, that's we've got the basic premise of Batman. What if that happened in the real world? What would happen to this character, and what would he be like? What would be, because most people are three-dimensional in the real world. Like we have many different facets to our personality. We're not just this one note kind of thing. So that is what they did for Bruce Wayne. They broadened him out psychologically, and then they put him in a world that slightly resembled our own, like it was a kind of almost, like a light facsimile of our own world. And the results were great. It wasn't that Batman is actually a realistic character, or even more realistic than other comic book characters. What they did that was so fantastic, which made it feel like that was what was happening, is they grounded it in a psychological realism, not scientific, because if you look at what Batman does in that movie, it's completely you can't do it, basically. A lot of what he did in the movie you cannot do, simple fact. The grappling hooks, the way they work and everything like that, cannot do it. So but they did a very, very good job with Batman Begins. Now, there are some great comics recently which looked at Superman not just as you know, the fantasy side, which is great. There's loads of great fantasy sides, but there's a lot of great comics, like for instance, Superman Birth, Superman Birthright. There's kind of, you could argue that even Red Sun is one of these comics. And there's the great comic, the Superman Earth 1, both 1 and 2. Some people didn't like it, but I thought it was fantastic. Now, what they take this Superman as is an alien invasion story, or an alien, a story about the discovery of humanity of aliens. Okay? Yes, the alien happens to be unrealistic because he looks like us, and he can fly and has laser vision and all this kind of stuff, which is explained by the rather you know, ludicrous kind of Superman lore, which is his cells drink up the radiation from the red sun, oh sorry, from the yellow sun or whatever, which is fine. I mean, that's fine, but like that is hard to, that's maybe a bit harder to ground or accept in reality. But once you've accepted that, okay, this just happens to be an alien, a story about an alien who lands on Earth, and what are the implications of humanity first discovering an alien being, and what if that alien being, beyond that, for some reason had godlike powers? How would we respond to that? What would our, you know, what would we feel about that? And added to that, how would he respond to us? What would his, you know, how would he feel not knowing where he came from at first, and then slowly discovering that he is, as Kevin Costner quite eloquently puts, the answer to if we're alone in the universe. And you know, this is the point I'm trying to make, is that this is not a story that can wholly, you could ground that in reality, you really can, and some comics have done it very, very successfully, but they've also remained very, very true to the Superman character, in the sense that he's an alien, but he's been raised by this all-Americana family who sees the kind of best in us, and you know, and teaches him the value of you know, how kind and vulnerable human beings are, and that perhaps they need at times a protector, and he could possibly use his powers for that very you know, reason. So my point is that there are stories out there as Superman which are very, very kind of modern day interpretations, and what I thought that this Superman movie was trying to do, and let me go back to this is the interesting point, and I'm sorry I've taken long and drawn out to say this, but the thing I thought that was interesting when I saw the trailers, which I feel slightly betrayed by, that I thought that Zack Snyder was trying to do, and I thought that they had figured out, was that they were trying to tell a story about Superman that would get the general audience to accept this character as cool again, accept him as, you know, okay, yes, he's a bit antiquated in his sense of morality and stuff like that, but in the end, the story of Superman, the alien invasion, the alien on Earth who has hidden among us, who has great godlike powers, and what would it be like to be such a being? You know, what kind of things would that individual kind of go through, the kind of suffering that they would go through. And I thought that was the story he wanted to tell, but instead what he really wanted to tell was just a crash bang action boom bang, something explodes, another thing explodes story. He didn't really, you know, the interest in the actual character of Superman was far less than his interest in getting things to explode as soon as possible. I mean, from the first scene in Krypton, where there's masses of explosions and crashing and booms, and there's someone shot within the first 3 minutes of the 4 minutes of the film, and then there's explosions, there's the flying dragons, and within that first 5 minutes there's already explosions and whatever, and then he goes and it's an oil rig, and then there's another explosion. Show me maybe 5 minutes or 7 minutes of this film, that back to back, that doesn't have some action, and I'll be like an action piece, and I'll be very, very surprised. So it seems to me that he was far more interested in telling the story, just a story of explosions, than the actual story of this very amazing character who has all these profound implications for how we view ourselves. A god amongst us, an alien, for God's sake. Wow, the answer to "Are we alone in the universe?" has just been answered. What a profound thing. And what does this guy think of it? What do we think about it? Etc., etc., etc. So that wasn't told, and I think in the midst of that, whether you have the character be a Boy Scout or not is really, really quite irrelevant. So let's go on. He then talks about that I might have to do this in 2 parts. Jesus, because the video is going to kind of cut me off in a second, or in some time. But let me go on to his next point. So he said, let's compare the Titanic to Man of Steel in terms of character development. Now he says, about Jack. This is actually a very, very good film. I actually like it, and I'm glad he used it as an example, because it's a really great film. You obviously have some good taste in movies, because a lot of guys don't accept that this is a good movie because it's all romantic and all over whatever. But anyway, so Jack and Rose are on the Titanic. One of them's poor, one of them's from the aristocracy, and it's a love story of kind of the Romeo and Juliet variety of 2 people from 2 different worlds being connected by love. And the development of the characters is very, very good in that movie. But one thing we have to remember is Titanic is also a bit of an action movie as well. It's a bit of a disaster movie, because right at the end of the movie you have ship capsize and all the special effects. I mean, nothing had been seen like that in cinema when the Titanic came out. It was absolutely breathtaking if you went to see it in the cinema. The effects and how they, like the way they kind of filmed and did the breaking of the Titanic. So it's actually an absolute visual spectacle, as well as a romance story. So we've got 2 to 3 quarters of this movie, which is just the development of this love story and getting us to care about the characters of Jack and Rose, whether it be them dancing in an Irish bar, or them standing at the helm or the front of the ship, and him showing her how to break the bondage of her, symbolically showing her how to break the bondage of her kind of stifled upbringing, where in fact she wanted adventure and not to just be married off as as they kind of did in the old ways to the most appropriate family. So she's breaking free of those chains of actually womanhood at that time, because that's what women, really, almost against their will sometimes, were getting married off to the best suitor, even if that suitor was an arsehole, as in the villain of the piece. But all through, like 3/4, as I said, of that movie was just development of their relationship and why they loved each other, and also the relationship of her with the villain, and how much of an arsehole he was. All of them fantastic performances. And you know what? That is why, right at the end of the movie, when the ship finally capsizes, and this is the point, when the ship finally capsizes, everyone cares. Even the guys who pretend they don't like the fucking Titanic, like the Titanic is bullshit. Like, oh, I don't like romantic movies. Whatever. You can see it's a good movie. You can watch it. Like, you know, it's not like, oh my god, I just can't watch this. You know, I don't like romantic movies that much, but you can watch it. And that's basically the reason why, because there's a huge action set piece right at the end, which is incredible to watch, incredible to look at, and you care what happens to these characters, even if it's cheesy at the end. You just give a shit what happens to these characters, even if you want Leonardo DiCaprio to freeze in the water because you think, what a prick, you still care that he freezes in the water, you know, or what happens to the villain, or what happens to Rose. And that's the point of making a good film. Now, I'm not saying that Man of Steel is necessarily in the same genre, but there's a lot of the same tropes. At the heart of the Superman story is a love story, and that's between Lois and Superman, or Lois and Clark, which is one of the most compelling love stories, I think, ever written in popular fiction. That story of why Lois loves Superman is a absolutely great story, in terms of, you know, you've got this normal guy who presents himself as a normal guy, but inside is so much greater, and he, you know, is absolutely pining for this hip kind of extroverted, kind of like cool, popular chick, and she's actually in love with him, but with another version of him, because he actually is this kind of Superman who saves her all the time and is incredibly heroic. And Clark Kent obviously always has to disappear when she comes, you know, so therefore she thinks he's a coward, whereas he's the one who is the real hero who's always saving her. And he's even more heroic by kind of not telling her and keeping it under wraps, because he's doing it so that she'd never be in danger, because if everyone knew who he was, then, and their relationship, then she'd constantly be under threat. So it's all a very, very clever kind of story that the original writers kind of came up with. In any case, so at the center of Superman is a love story, but forget about that. Just going back to the Man of Steel. Now, he talks about character development, and let me is in a rush. Their love story is happening while the boat is crashing and being destroyed. The villain somehow sets himself up to be a bad guy during the time the boat is crashing, and then there's a tidal wave, and he saves the Rose from the tidal wave, and we don't even know who Rose and Jack are yet, and then there's a flashback with an action scene in that where you know, Jack is on a motorbike riding to get to the Titanic, but there's cops chasing him because he's wanted as a criminal in Ireland, and then Rose flies in on a plane, and you know, this is the kind of Titanic you're talking about that would happen, because that is exactly what happened in Man of Steel. There wasn't one moment of like, oh, let me calm down after I've just seen this great spectacular action scene. As you said, these action scenes were pretty spectacular in the Man of Steel. Okay, I have to go because I'm going to do